Hi, everybody. I want to talk to you today about how we can preserve our stories for future generations. And so, for example, I'm coming to you today. I'm actually recording this episode on Zoom, which, you can get a free account for Zoom and do the same thing that I'm doing, because this is only going to last maybe 10 minutes or less, which is what my sweet spot is. I like recording things that are about 10 minutes or less, usually. Sometimes I have to go longer, depending on what the content is. But in this particular case, one of the things from a family history preservation standpoint, there are tons of websites that have lists of questions, family history questions. So if you went out there and Googled family history questions, you would find all kinds of stuff or ideas about what you could talk about to future generations. Because I personally consider this to be um, a letter, if you will, a recorded letter of some kind that I am recording for future generations. I'm not even going to know. I don't even know who they are. I'll be long gone. um, but they may find my YouTube channel. They may eventually find my podcast on this subject. And I want them to know me. I want them to know my family in a way that governmental records just will not do. Okay. So when we are doing our family history research, we can find all kinds of things like birth records, birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, all that kind of lovely stuff. But it's another thing entirely to run across something that is way more personal, that is a letter that's been written or a diary that's been written. And so now in our age of technology, we have the ability to do things that no other generations have been able to do. We can photo document ourselves ad nauseum. We can, video record ourselves ad nauseum. We can record ourselves just talking, you know, in so many easy ways now that it's important for us to actually think about, okay, so what else do we want to leave behind besides a birth date, marriage date, a death date, you know, because there's so much more to us. And I remember when I first started working on my family tree at 16, because of a US history project in high school, um, I was blown away when I first started actually running across actual letters. So, for example, one of the first things that I found was a letter that was written during the Civil War between some grandparents, a set of grandparents, and this particular however many greats grandfather never returned home. He died on the battlefield. So having that letter puts, even though it's a very ordinary letter, this letter is not talking about anything other than, hey, I hope you're doing well. We're doing okay, and talking about what's happening at home and all that, because it's written from the wife to the husband. And she's just talking about ordinary things. But it gives me a certain insight into what their lives were like, you know. So, for instance, on his Civil War record, he's listed as a shoemaker. And in the letter, she actually talks about the fact that she's making shoes for the kids. I'm like, wow. So she knew how to do it too. She had learned how to make shoes. Okay. And so it's a little tidbit that you would never get without a letter. Okay. I mean, I knew he was a shoemaker, but I didn't know that she also knew how to make shoes. That was a pretty cool little tidbit to learn about this particular, however many greats grandmother. Okay. Um, I have found writings of other people, and, having those has been powerful. I also have a lot of photos of family members that goes back several generations. My mother and my grandmother were kind of a hoarder of pictures, which I'm glad they were, you know. Because, if you look at my family tree on Ancestry, I have tons of photos. I have all photos of my grandparents. I have all photos of my great grandparents. I have all photos of my great great grandparents, and I have smatterings of photos that go even further back. So I have an incredible treasure trove of those things. But as we go forward, in our age of technology, we have so many other opportunities, right? So we have Zoom and we can talk to people around the world. So if you're not close to your grandparents, if you're not close to your family, you could still jump on Zoom and do an interview, and with Zoom, it also records an audio file. And every time I do a recording like this, I also preserve the audio file and put it on my podcast. Okay. Because I don't know how somebody in the future may find me, and may find information about me and what I say about my family, etc. But I want them to see a pretty good glimpse of who we were, what we represented, what we thought about, what was important to us, etc. And I can tell you this is a treasure for future generations. It is important to do these kinds of things. Um, so, for instance, today, one of the things I thought would be fun is one of the questions that I found online, about your family history, was to talk about a toy that maybe you had from a childhood that maybe you had kept all these years. Well, I'm turning 60 this year, and so I thought, oh, I actually have something from my childhood. It's not a toy, but let me describe, kind of what happened here. So, my mother, Mary Bell Skelton Bonner, Skelton was her maiden name. She was an avid reader. This woman could get lost in a book, and I remember as a kid when she was reading a book, she was totally immersed. If I wanted her attention, I would actually have to go poke at her to get her to notice me. She was that engrossed when she was reading. And so she got me early into reading as well. By the time I went to kindergarten, I could already read pretty well. And so I remember one time, and I was still really young. I probably was still in elementary school at the time. But I remember one day I had this conversation with her. I said, Mom, you're reading a book that doesn't have any pictures, because I was used to at the time reading things like Dr. Seuss books, that type of thing. Right. Um, I had to have pictures. And so I thought it was kind of weird that she was reading this book that didn't have any pictures. And she said, when you're reading, your brain, your mind can actually create pictures. And I thought, well, that's a novel idea, you know? And she said, you might be ready now to have a book that has less pictures in it. I said, okay, I'm willing to try that. And so she bought me a book, and I still have it. Um, this book was called Ribsy. You can still find it on the internet, actually. It was written by Beverly Cleary in 1964. That was the year I was born. It's illustrated by Lewis Darling, and so it has some illustrations in it, some black and white illustrations, but no pictures at all. And as far as like colored photographs or anything like that, it's just illustrations that are hand drawn. And this is a book about a dog that gets lost and his odyssey in how he gets back to his family, his people. And so this is the first book that my mom bought for me that didn't have as many pictures in it. And it was much longer. Most of the books that I had been reading up until then might have been 30 pages long or something like that. This was 192 pages long. And so I had lost track of this book actually. But my mom kept it. My mom kept it. And I think for a birthday, she gave it to me as a present. And so I have kept it. So this book is 60 years old. It is as old as me because I'm turning 60 here soon. And it's one of my most prized possessions. Okay. And so I hope that my family considers it's an heirloom. It's still in really good shape. The book binding is not broken or anything. It's in really good shape, so it can last a lot longer. So I hope my family keeps it, you know. And in some ways, maybe eventually, one of these days, you might have to turn it, my future family may have to turn it into a digital copy or something like that. But this book is something that I treasure, and it is from my childhood. All right. So now you can see sort of that these stories can be incredibly powerful for future generations to run across. And even with this, like I'm posting this on my YouTube channel, I'm posting it on my podcast about family history. And you can use it as sort of a guide of how you might do an interview with someone over Zoom, for them to talk about their family history and their background and all that kind of stuff, right? And honestly, there is this is priceless for future generations to find. It there is no amount of money that could even come close to what these can mean to future generations. You don't have to do a ton of them, just a few, you know. Um, and you might get a bug to do a lot of them. Uh, and so that's entirely up to you. Okay, so I hope you find inspiration in that and that you'll try some of these out. Because, you know, my YouTube channel, for example, is fairly scripted in the past. And most of the videos that I have done are, not personal like this. I mean, they are, but this is different. This has a different feel than, some of the more produced type of videos or podcasts that I've done. Okay. All right. So I hope this helps you to think about these future generations and what they may find about you, because it's really incredible when you do them. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you soon.